Hello, welcome to Mandela Unveiled. The name is Mandela. On this channel, we speak everything health. We take the issues in your society and we make you understand the impact of every issue on your health. The political, social, environmental, whatever issue. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, share the videos, like, and hit the comment section and write a comment. Tell us what you want us to do more, and we shall deliver. Today, we're going to talk about medical tourism. Apparently, medical tourism is traveling to another country for medical care. So, if you travel from Ghana to Burkina Faso to seek medical care, it's medical tourism. Today, you know something different. Medical tourism has existed for a very long time. A lot of people travel over the world to seek medical care. For instance, in the United States, people travel to Mexico and Canada, South and Central America, and the Caribbean to seek medical care. They embark on these journeys from the United States to other countries because, one, the cost of receiving similar services in other countries at a lower price is something that is appealing to some American citizens. Also, people may also travel because, for instance, if you have Spanish American speaking person, they would love to travel to a Caribbean or South or Central American country because they share the same culture and language. So it's easier to work with such a physician. And also, it's also possible that the services people travel for are either unavailable in their country or the services are unapproved in their country. Mostly people travel for fertility treatment, cosmetic and plastic surgeries, tissue and organ transplant, and many more. You know, people from Africa also travel for medical tourism, both private citizens and the political elite. The reason why I'm discussing this today is because of medical tourism in Africa. There are two groups of people who travel from Africa for medical tourism, as I mentioned earlier, private citizens and the political elite. Private citizens, mostly celebrities or people who have worked so hard to earn their money, so they have every right to spend it anyhow they want or where to seek medical care. It is part of their human rights. So fair enough. But it becomes a problem when the political elite in Africa travel abroad to seek medical care while the medical system back home is in deplorable state. For years, the African medical system has been in a deplorable state. Nonetheless, there have been some growths, steady growth in many countries, while in other African countries, the healthcare system is still stagnant. In fact, it is not surprising that in 2001, African states met in Abuja and enacted the Abuja Declaration to commit 15% of each African country's budget towards healthcare. As we speak in 2023, most countries are still struggling to meet that budget. In fact, Abuja, Nigeria, where this policy was agreed upon, last year, Nigeria committed only 3.09% of their budget towards health. You see, politicians or political elite traveling to seek medical care abroad, no one is against it. But it becomes a problem. It becomes a shame when the political elite travel with large entourage. These people will be accommodated, they will feed, and some of this entourage would go for shopping spree. And to make matters worse, this medical tourism that the political elite engage in, they do not use their own monies. They feed on the taxpayers' money. So all these travels are funded by the taxpayers' money from African countries. And to top it all, they travel in private jets. A recent example is Ali Bongo of Gabon, who went for a conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, suddenly had a stroke, was flown to Morocco, and then to Switzerland. He stayed away from the country for 10 consecutive months. Dear Ali Bongo, you returned to Morocco. Morocco is an African country. Why didn't you go to your country? These are questions that we need to ask and answer. These are burning questions that the youth in Africa must begin to ask themselves. Some people do not have the means. Some private citizens do not have the means to travel abroad to seek medical care. So when they are sick, what should they do? When their parents are sick, where should they go? When you have left the healthcare system uncared for and unfunded. Like I said, it's either the African political elite are insensitive or they are not visionary enough to realize the medical tourism potential in Africa. India has realized that potential in Africa. Of late, most private citizens in Africa travel to India. And sometimes when they run out of cash, you see people popping up with GoFundMe accounts. And people donate. Some celebrities from Ghana have ended up in India, and people have to pay in hard currency to treat them. Unfortunately, some of them meet their untimely death. But that is the situation. In the 21st century, African hospitals are death traps. African hospitals have been left unfunded over years. Another typical example of recent medical travel is the president of Benin, Patrice Talon, who went through 2 successful surgeries in Paris and has returned home. Hallelujah to that. But dear Patrice Talon, now that you have returned to Benin, please help build the country's healthcare system. So the next time you are sick and you need an emergency surgery, you are not flown to Paris, but you'll be treated in your own country. At least Omar al-Bashir is not a saint. Nonetheless, he was treated in his country's private medical system. He had to undergo an exploratory cardiac catheterization. And the medical people know what that means. Though it was in the private sector, but it's in his country. No funds were wasted. Over the years, African leaders have traveled to seek medical care outside. None have realized the medical tourism potential in Africa. We can pardon Patrice Talon because he hasn't been in power for long. Maybe he hasn't been in power for so long. We can pardon him, but we cannot pardon Ali Bongo. We cannot pardon Omar Bongo, his father, whom he took over from. Omar Bongo was in power for 42 consecutive years, ruled Gabon, and for 42 consecutive years, he sought medical treatment in Barcelona, Spain, till he even met his untimely death in Barcelona. Just imagine the number of years, 42 years, how he has enriched the medical system of Barcelona with his travel, his entourage, the hotel bills, and whatever it is. But for 42 years, he couldn't build any better medical system in his country. Such that when his son Ali Bongo was sick, he had to seek treatment in Morocco and subsequently Switzerland. Another typical example of a leader who lived in power for long without impact is the late Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe constantly traveled to Singapore to seek medical care. Robert Mugabe has been in power for over 30 years. As we speak today, Zimbabwe's medical system is in a state of crisis. The country has only 3,500 doctors to about 16 million population. That is very suicidal. Healthcare workers are living in droves. They are living in their numbers. Well, no one can blame them. Mugabe could have built the healthcare system in his country. Well, he died in Singapore. Even the cost involved transporting him back to Zimbabwe is another question. Meanwhile, Robert Mugabe, according to so many reports, even parliamentary reports, indicated he funded Laurent Kabila's military to a tune of $200 million. These monies could have been used to improve the healthcare system of Zimbabwe. What about the man he funded, Laurent Kabila? Laurent Kabila, after receiving that 200 million, never even bothered to build his own country's healthcare system. Apparently, reports indicate he died on his way to Zimbabwe when he was shot by his own cronies. You can imagine if Kabila had invested in his own country's healthcare system, there was no need to convey him all the way to Zimbabwe, because in medical care, a second is very important. If he had a very good medical system in his country, his life would have been saved. Another typical example of a president traveling from his country to another country to seek care is the late president of Malawi, Bingu wa Mutharika, who apparently flew from Malawi, Lilongwe, the capital, to South Africa, and reports indicated that he flew there because there was power outage. Wow. Meanwhile, before his demise, Mutharika had spent $14 million on a presidential jet. Is that our priorities? When you have power issues in your country, it's a presidential jet, your number one priority. Mr. Mutureka. This is a man who worked as an economist at the international stage. He was hailed. How did you descend to this level? How did you descend to the level where you cannot distinguish right from wrong? Well, and the list goes on and on. Malam Bakai Sanka of Guinea-Bissau, he also died in France. Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia died in Belgium. Michael Sata of Zambia, UK. Levi Mwanawasa of Zambia too died in France. The list goes on. Lassana Conte, Bernardo João Vieira of Guinea-Bissau, who spent 32 years as a leader, president, and prime minister in and out of Guinea-Bissau. All these leaders never thought it prudent to improve the healthcare system of their country. All they did was to constantly travel out of Africa to seek medical care. Now, let me give a breakdown of the medical tourism sector in Africa. The medical tourism sector is worth 15 billion US dollars as of 2021. And it has been projected to grow to the tune of $49.50 billion in 2030. Why aren't African leaders, some African leaders, tapping into this medical tourism? Well, some African leaders apparently have a vision. I remember recently in Ghana when the ruling party were looking to choose a presidential candidate. One of the aspirants, Kennedy Agyapong, constantly hit on tourism and how he would transform the country Ghana using tourism. And I really loved his passion and idea on that subject. You know, though he mentioned tourism, he didn't mention medical tourism. But I know these are things that someone who has an eye for tourism, when you as a technocrat mention to him that this is what you can do in tourism, I believe this is a leader who can invest in such an area. However, African leaders aren't bothered. Well, the Indians are very sharp and smart. The biggest healthcare chain in India, Apollo Health Care, has invested over 70 million US dollars in the construction of a 500-bed capacity in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, with state-of-the-art equipment to serve the medical tourism needs of the East African sub-region and to cover Africa. Another Indian company, BioHealth, is investing $5 million on cardiology diagnostics, radiology, and dialysis. Recently, there was a documentary about the dialysis center in Ghana. It's so pathetic. Meanwhile, this political elite and their families travel abroad to seek medical care, so they do not care. Well, there is a popular African proverb that says a man who doesn't eat at home is likely not to give his wife enough money to prepare a good pot of soup. Certainly, that is where the African politician falls under. Once they don't seek medical care at home, they don't care. But it is high time we point to them that these are some of the opportunities you are missing. The amount of money you spend yearly is enough to improve the healthcare systems in your country. There was an article I read that stated that in Uganda, they spent about 277 billion shillings on the travel of VIPs abroad for treatment. And that money can build 10 state-of-the-art private, to the standard of private clinics in Uganda. What are we doing to ourselves? What are we doing to ourselves as citizens? Is the African leader wicked or they are short-sighted? When you guys travel out to the US, Canada, France, Switzerland, Paul Biya, when you travel to Switzerland, don't you see how beautiful it is? Dear Paul Biya of Cameroon, when you travel to Switzerland, don't you see how beautiful it is? When you visit their hospitals in Switzerland, don't you see how beautiful it is? When you travel to Switzerland, Paul Biya, how many people do you carry with you? For so many years, you have exploited your country. It's high time you improve the healthcare system of your country. Well, we have a lot of visionary leaders out there in Africa. And a typical example is the former president of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama, who constructed the Legon Medical Center, a 1,000 bed capacity hospital, 1,000, with state-of-the-art facilities. At least it can serve the needs of the average Ghanaian who cannot travel to the US or India for medical care. And this facility has been lauded by the WHO. Even the Director General of WHO had to praise the president for this effort. A 1,000 bed capacity hospital. And most of the health professionals who work in that facility, some were sent to Israel to get some professional training and to learn some expertise that can help the country. These are the type of visionary leaders we are talking about. We do have some countries that have visionary leaders. The current president of Malawi, Chekwe, dear President Lazarus Chukwueze, the austerity measures you put in place to prevent government officials from traveling abroad, that is so laudable. That money be used to invest in the country, healthcare system. So do not ignore the healthcare system. However, similar measures were implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic, but people did not adhere. And that is because the enforcement then was a problem. Dear President Lazarus, let the enforcement work this time around. Let the enforcement work this time around. The current president of Tanzania is doing a great job. And her predecessor, John Pombe Magufuli, was also a visionary leader who believed in building his country's systems, from transportation to healthcare, so many systems. Why must we always travel out of the country to seek medical care? Recently, I was reading an article about Jacob Zuma, who had traveled to Russia to seek medical care. When did we get to this stage? South Africa has a good medical system. At least they are number one in Africa. They scored about 66.6% in the global rating, followed by Kenya with a 61 point. Dear Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, you allegedly embezzled over $34 billion. It is alleged. I'm not saying it. All the facts are there on the internet. Why do you travel to Russia for medical treatment? When 80% of your country's population rely on the public healthcare system that is weak, and one man can embezzle over $34 billion, and the one who has come after him, Ramaphosa, is no better. You guys have to wake up. This is Mandela on Mandela Unveiled. If you like what we are doing, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share the video, give us a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we shall delve deep into that. Thank you so much, and we shall meet next time. Bye-bye.